I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and traditional territories of our Coast Salish relatives. We raise our hands for allowing them to having us live, work, and play in their traditional territories. We really thank them, as we are not originally from these lands, and to being able to be here is a huge honor. And we definitely send out our love and our prayers to all of our Coast Salish relatives.
So welcome to episode 2. This one's Elle-Máija Tailfeathers, and once again 3 years ago, so time really does fly. My very first interaction with her was quite the story. So funny thing enough, at the time I was working for Loretta, and at the time Maya was just filming her feature film, and the only time they can meet me that day was fairly late. I think it was like 7 or 8, and we were just wrapping things up in Loretta's episode in her web series. And I remember telling them that I'm on my way, and when I looked at the GPS, it was like a 30-minute walk, and I genuinely didn't want to make them wait that long. So I started running. I was booking it. I was trying to run as fast as I could, and it just seemed that fate or creator, universe, whatever you want to believe in, just stepped in and said, "I got you, fam." And a taxi just drove by me, and I was running like, taxi. So and the taxi stopped. I was like, "Can you meet me? Drive me over here." And yeah, so when I arrived at that interview, I was so winded and I was so exhausted. I was trying to answer the questions, but I didn't want to make them wait too long. So that was my first memory of Maya.
Yeah, and I've actually with all three of our guests, I've met them through my dad and my Noel, and through their experiences with working with indigenous filmmakers with art and with dance. And so that's how I feel like I since I was like very young, I knew all three of our guests. And I remember one of the first indigenous once I started like learning more about indigenous film, um, the one short I remember watching was Red Girl's Reasoning, and which is like
It's a
amazing.
it's visceral. It's a visceral experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I remember watching that when I was a teenager, and I was like, wow, it's so cool. It's like she's like indigenous, vigilante, and going out and taking on those basically predators. And so it's amazing short. I definitely go and check it out. That was my first ever piece of film that I watched from Elle-Máija. And since then, like going into when we went to the indigenous digital film program, learning more about multiple different nations, and we watched a little bit more of her films in there as well, and studying them, and to being able to just have a conversation with her was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Really amazing. She's an amazing speaker, and definitely just has so much knowledge, and you can just tell with all of what she says with her storytelling is just so um, in depth and so just all around like just amazing. And um, yeah, I absolutely enjoyed having this conversation with her.
Yeah, no, she's a visionary. She's up and coming. She's rising, and I genuinely feel fortunate and privileged to know her. And having her as our guest, I could not be any happier having anyone else from her and Doreen and Loretta. Of course, there's more, and there will be more, and that is a promise and that is a guarantee. So, but just in general, that I'm grateful that our guests did agree to our humble little itty bitty podcast. So, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And then for this goes for all of our guests, is that we really thank you for taking time out of your day for being a part of this project, and being you know helping out and supporting us in any way possible. And that's definitely definitely thank you for that.
yeah. And one minor shameless plug. Um, at the time, right now, of her documentary, Kiyam Piop. Oh shoot! I'm so sorry, Maya. Her documentary, Kiyam Piopitsin, um, is out right now. So if you have the time, go watch it. We need to watch it. So yeah. So once again, thank you for tuning in, and the episode's going to start now. Cue in special effects. Maya, welcome. We'd love to have you. We're glad you're here. So yeah. Um, because you're of two different nations, does that ever influence your work?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be here. I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Elle-Máija Tailfeathers. I come from Ghana, or Kainai, which is part of the Blackfoot Confederacy. It's also known as the Blood Reserve, and it's located in what is now known as southern Alberta. I'm also Sámi from northern Norway. My father lives over in his home village in Unyarka, and my mother lives at home on the reserve. And I currently reside in the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, otherwise known as the city of Vancouver. And yeah, you're going back to your question, which was about being from two different nations and how that influences my work. Yeah, I would certainly say that that both of those cultures and communities impact the way that I tell stories, especially if if a film is set in either of those places. So in my most recent documentary, which is called Gimmabi Bitsen, the meaning of empathy, it all takes place in my Blackfoot community. It's a portrait of my community's response to the opioid crisis. And that film is absolutely influenced by Blackfoot knowledge and teachings and Blackfoot ways of being, and was completely shaped by the people and community that I know and love.
Oh, that's amazing. It's amazing. Really hope to check that out. Um, so with your what you do on camera is mixing both being behind the camera as a director, but as well in front of the camera as an actress. Um, what do you do to balance between those two worlds?
Well, I started as an actor. I went to Vancouver Film School for acting like 16 years ago, when I was 19 and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I went to acting school, and I think the reason that I took that route is because I'd always kind of been involved in the arts, and I wanted to work in film, and I didn't realize that working as a filmmaker was even within the possibilities for career options for me, I figured that acting was the only way to access the film world. And so I went to film school for acting, and then I acted professionally in film and TV for a few years, but found myself just really frustrated with the industry as a racialized person, as an Indigenous person, and as a woman. I felt like there just wasn't really space for me in the industry, and also just felt like I was consistently auditioning for roles that were being written and directed by non-Indigenous people about Indigenous people. So they were just consistently replicating these like really damaging stereotypes and just harmful representations of our people. And so my grandmother, who's a big advocate, both of my grandparents actually were big advocates for post-secondary education. So my grandmother just kind of like kept pushing me to go back to school and study something real. So I went to UBC and studied Indigenous studies with a minor in women's and gender studies. And while I was there, I was like finally able to understand why the industry is so problematic, and was also finally exposed to like this beautiful world of Indigenous cinema that exists that I didn't know existed at the time. Like this was, I think I went back to university when I was like 23. Yeah, so it's been like 12 years now. Yeah, so I hadn't really been exposed to Indigenous cinema before that. And when I finally saw what was out there, I was just like so mind blown and so inspired to try it myself. So for one class, I was given the opportunity to submit like a media project rather than a paper, and I submitted a really terrible short documentary that I made about representations of Indigenous women in film. Like I used iMovie and shot it on a camcorder. But having the opportunity to like actually have narrative agency and control over the situation was just like life altering. And that's when I knew I wanted to continue trying to make films. And so I've been making films for 10 years now. And have kind of, I guess, just found my way into being able to do both acting and directing. I predominantly am more of a filmmaker. That's where I put most of my energy. But every now and then, I have the opportunity to act in something really cool, like Blood Quantum. That was a lot of fun, directed by Jeff Barnaby, and I got to act in Night Raiders, which is Danis Goulet's premiere feature film. It's her first one, and it's a really cool movie, and it's coming out later this fall. And then I got to act in The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open, which I co-wrote and co-directed and worked with you on, Michael. So yeah, all of those opportunities have been really wonderful. But again, I still think there's like a huge, a lot of work left to do in the industry in regards to representation of Indigenous people, and non-Indigenous filmmakers are continually getting it wrong. And so I still feel like, as an actor, I still really feel frustrated with the industry. I was thinking, actually, came to the realization not too long ago that in 15 years of auditioning for film and TV as an actor, only one non-Indigenous director has cast me for an Indigenous role in 15 years, which I think says a lot about the state of the industry in terms of non-Indigenous people's ideas of who Indigenous people are. In many cases, I've been, when I haven't gotten cast, there have been people who have been cast that have like no living connection to any Indigenous community. So yeah, I mean, there's big issues in terms of representations of Indigenous people in front of the camera. Obviously, Indigenous filmmakers and directors are going about it in the right way, but the power still is held largely by non-Indigenous people in the industry.
That's absolutely true. Indigenous content is just running to try to catch up. And it's nice to see that we're slowly getting our voice and getting traction into mainstream media.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of big changes happening, which are pretty cool.
mhm. As you mentioned, I was a part of filming in The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open. That's long title, which is beautiful. What was it like to have two separate countries to sponsor your work, and was that difficult to manage?
Yeah, well, we're kind of at this like really interesting and exciting time for Indigenous cinema in Canada. And it has so much to do with like all of the advocacy work and activism that's happened from within the Indigenous film community. So there's been people pushing for decades for change and for access to resources and pushing for equity and fair representation and all of those things. And so The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open was made at a time when the telefilm Indigenous stream had just started. So we were one of the first projects to benefit from that. And we also benefited from a few other like exciting streams aimed at like diversity and inclusion, like the CBC Breaking Barriers Fund, which no longer exists. I think they call it something else now. But that being said, it still wasn't enough to make the film that we wanted to and needed to make. We were still considered like a low budget independent feature. It was around $1 million Canadian, which sounds like a lot, but it's really nowhere near enough to make the kind of quality of cinema that we wanted to make. And so we were able to access some funds from Norway because I'm a dual citizen, so I have Canadian citizenship and Norwegian citizenship through my Sámi side, and it's really interesting to be part of that community over there because they have the Sámi Film Institute, which is like this really amazing advocacy organization that does a lot of funding as well for Sámi film, and they're really active in representing Arctic Indigenous peoples and building networks that way. And they've been really fundamental in like kind of like the global Indigenous film movement. And so they've supported a lot of my films, and they were actually the first ones to offer some funding for The Body Remembers. And then we were able to access funds from the Norwegian Film Institute. They, I think maybe we got like 10% of our budget from them or less. But it was important for us to try and do this co-production route, just to be able to, acquire all the funds that we needed in order to make the kind of film that we wanted to make, because what we achieved technically in that film has never ever been done in film before. And we wanted to make sure that we could like execute our vision in the way that we imagined, and so we needed the funds to do that. And so a co-production was a really interesting way to go, and so that meant that we had to have a number of Indigenous crew or Norwegian crew members. So we had wonderful sound recordists come over from Norway, and we had our wardrobe person come over from Norway, and then we did all of our post-production in Norway. So that was a really interesting process. Like we flew over there to do our sound mix and sound design and color grading, and yeah, it was fun just to be like overseas working on that kind of stuff and to see how they do things over there. But yeah, an interesting experiment. It's challenging because there's all of these like production treaties and kind of like requirements you have to meet in order to have the funds administered properly and all of that.
Oh, that's really awesome. Sounds really amazing. Yeah. So with your, you mentioned you had a project coming up in the fall time. What else is next? Like, what else are you been up to? What other projects you have down the line in the future? I know this past year had to put a halt on many productions. But yeah, we're just wondering like what else is next for you?
Thanks. Well, my feature-length documentary is premiering on Friday, April 29th. So I think that's a Friday. Yeah, so it's premiering in less than a week. It's called Gimmabi-Bitsin, The Meaning of Empathy. And I've been working on it for 5 years now. And it's a portrait of my community's response to the opioid or the drug poisoning crisis. And I'm just really, really proud of my community and all of the hard work that happens there on a daily basis in terms of trying to find solutions. Um, the crisis has been ongoing for 7 years now in the community, and in the last year alone, we've lost over 90 members of our nation to overdose, and that's a lot. That's a lot of people, and all of those people obviously had families and loved ones and hopes and dreams, and their deaths were all preventable through harm reduction. And so the film looks at the ways that harm reduction has worked in our community, and also explores kind of like the complicated conversation and maybe conservative attitudes that exist towards harm reduction. So for your listeners who don't know what harm reduction is, or maybe aren't that familiar with it, there are two kind of general ways of treating addiction. One is like the abstinence model, which is like um, that people are kind of expected to quit drug and alcohol use cold turkey altogether, and generally do like 12-step programs like AA and NA and the Red Road to Wellbriety. Like these are very commonly accepted ways of approaching addiction. But with the opioid crisis in particular, our community realized that 12-step programs and abstinence-based ideas just don't work in regards to people who are addicted to something like fentanyl, for instance. So people were going to treatment centers, leaving after a few days, relapsing, using alone because of the stigma and shame associated with addiction, and then they were overdosing and dying. So we had to take radical action, and so that meant implementing harm reduction. So harm reduction is it's a way of thinking that influences policies and procedures and treatment models for addiction. And harm reduction accepts that um, drug users or alcohol users don't necessarily have to quit cold turkey. It sort of meets them where they're at and recognizes that the road to recovery is very complicated and there's no one simple way forward. And so harm reduction is many things. It's like one thing is like distributing clean needles to prevent the spread of disease. Another is providing opioid agonist therapy or opioid replacement therapy like methadone or Suboxone. Suboxone is what is used in our community, and Suboxone has what's called or what's known as naloxone in it, which is like the antidote to an opioid overdose, and it also prevents people from experiencing the um, the mental euphoria or high that people feel when they use opioids. And so essentially it provides people with the opioid that they need for their biological dependency on it, but they don't feel high, essentially. And so Suboxone is the idea is that people will be prescribed Suboxone and take it every day and eventually taper off until they don't need it anymore. And a lot of people in our community are on Suboxone or have been on Suboxone and are now totally clean and sober. And so it's worked in our community. And we also brought in naloxone for community members. So we have naloxone trainings on a very regular basis, and naloxone is what reverses an opioid overdose. And so there are a lot of people, just community members, regular community members, who have Narcan or naloxone kits in their home or carry them around with them. And we've saved a lot of lives. And the reason harm reduction is so contentious or controversial is that a lot of people, especially Indigenous people, perceive it as like a form of enabling, because they believe that you're just assisting drug users in their addiction. Whereas I see it, and a lot of people see it, as a form of just taking care of people and offering empathy and compassion and meeting them where they're at. And so the word Gimmabibitsin, it's a Blackfoot word that essentially means to give compassion, to give empathy, and to think of empathy as a survival tool, a survival mechanism, and a way that our people have survived genocide. And so my mother, who's a physician on the reserve, she had this epiphany while we were filming, that Gimmabibitsin, or the concept of Gimmabibitsin, is very closely related to the ideas behind harm reduction, and that Gimmabibitsin can be used as our harm reduction, a way of treating people with drug and alcohol use with empathy and compassion rather than stigma and shame, because as we've seen in our community and many other communities, shame and stigma kill. Like that can lead to someone's life ending because they're using alone. So the film is about all of those things, and I'm really excited to share it with audiences, and it'll be premiering at the Hot Docs International Documentary Film Festival, which is all online this year, so people can just go to the box office and buy tickets online, and it's available throughout Canada. And it will also be playing at Doxa here in Vancouver, which I believe is also going to be Canada-wide online. And there are talks of a drive-in screening at Doxa, which I'm really excited about. So hopefully that works out. I don't know how it's going to go with COVID, but yeah, so that's kind of the next big project that I'm ready to put into the world.
Well, that sounds like a great movie. Drugs is a big thing that does need to be more awareness out and such. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. So yeah, Máija Tailfeathers, everyone. That was a great interview.
Thanks, guys, and I really loved you in Monkey Beach, Nick. Congrats on that, and I hope you keep acting. And yeah, it was an honor to be on the show, guys, and good luck with the rest of your interviews.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this. We really thank you, and really raise our hands up to you for taking the time out of your day for helping us out in regards to of you helping us out. We have a gift for you.
What?
Yeah, this is a canvas painting done by my dad, Mike Dangeli.
What?
Yeah, I have it upside down there.
That's so cool.
This one's called The Tail End of the Story.
No, that's so cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just wanted to thank you, just publicly gift you for taking the time out of your day for that. We really appreciate it, and hope that we can have a longer conversation, because there's definitely a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Aw, thanks, guys. Take care. I'm so touched by that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Really moved. All right. Cool. Well, take care. Thank you.
All right,
you as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
For those of you who are watching through the audio versions, is that we actually publicly thanked our guests by giving them all three of them a painting from Mike Dangeli as a thank you for taking the time out of their day, out of their busy schedules, to sit with us and to talk about their experiences talking about film. So we thanked each of them with a personal painting for them.
So recently some really disturbing news did happen where 215 children were found, and named Kamloops, and the sad part is that's just scratching the surface. There's unfortunately more out there, and yeah, no, they didn't get to go home, and that's genuinely sad.
Mm-hmm. And our hearts go out to all those families, all those children that couldn't make it home, and just to know that it's definitely heavy on our hearts, and for what and unfortunately what we call Canada and their history, and especially towards with our Indigenous people, of having going through the 60s scoop, going through residential school, the potlatch band, continuously, throughout today, what happened at Standing Rock, what happened what's going on with the pipelines, and that it's been a struggle with our Indigenous peoples, but we're still here, and we're still putting on the fight.
Yeah. So
no matter how hard we go, that we're still practicing our art, we're still practicing our culture. We're all 21st century Indigenous people. The fact that we're making podcasts, we're making film, we're making TV, we're changing the game, we're going into media and telling our stories. That is a huge victory, a huge honor, and definitely sending our honor to those who couldn't be here today.
Yeah. For those who are lost, those who are forgotten, you're not lost, you're not forgotten. We're honoring your sacrifice, and we're showing that we are still here. If you're here now and you watch through all the episodes, once again, truly thank you. It's basically over an hour, and that is huge. That's a lot of time that you put into our humble little podcast. So thank you. And yeah,
definitely want to, if you're watching through a visual platform, I want to definitely raise my hands to our guests. I want to thank all of our viewers as well, and as Mike was saying, listening to our podcast. Nt'oyasxn. Thank you, everyone. This is Doesn't Make the Cut, not Doesn't Make Cut. And so we're definitely happy to be doing this. Huge thank you to Telus Storyhive for accepting our application into doing this podcast, and as well as providing us with an amazing mentor, Kim Wheeler, for giving us, sharing us a bit of your knowledge into creating a podcast. And we're definitely honored and thankful to be having that.
Yeah, man. I want to personally thank our editors. Thank you all. And where you can find us, you ask. Well, Nick, where can they find us?
Where can they find us is right now we are getting a Instagram, Doesn't Make the Cut. You can find our YouTube page over on YouTube at Doesn't Make the Cut. You can find us as well individually if you want to see where we're going in our own careers as well. Me at Nick Dangeli on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that amazing stuff. I also have my film production company, Dangeli Productions, also on YouTube as well.
So just so you know, you're all loved, you're valuable, and if you can, please go hug a loved one Tell them you love them. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.